Hey guys, okay, so I am gonna kind of jumble up some scriptures today, kind of mixing it up a little bit. First, I want to talk a little bit about the law. In my church, we have been reading the Bible chronologically, and the first part of the Bible, there's some tough stuff in there, starting from probably about the last end of Exodus all the way into Deuteronomy. It's like so much law and so much failure because we're human and that's what we're good at, imperfection. And the issue with that is that more so that should be also juxtapose God's love. So we see that we fail, but God's love doesn't. And that's our redemption. So the law, in Exodus, the Israelites come out of Egypt and they're establishing a relationship with God. Moses has this awesome relationship with God, and the people, well, because our humanity our flesh is just weak, they kind of end up not really wanting a part of it. And they go they're gathered to meet God at the bottom of the mountain, and they're like, oh, we can't take it, Moses. Just give us the rule book. And a lot of us, we just like the rule book. Give me the checklist. Let me make sure I'm checking the list. And the problem with checklists is we don't really learn relationship. Now, Moses didn't have a checklist before this. Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac didn't have a checklist. Neither did Joseph. All of these guys, you can see that their relationship with God is what carried them and brought them into victory over different things in their lives. And I think for me, that's what we see is these laws are a way for us to understand more about God's character and his wisdom and his grace. But because the law is just, it does not leave much room for mercy. And it's hard because it binds us very, very difficultly. And if you want to just simplify it, we'll go down to the 10 Commandments. Actually, we'll fast forward ahead because I think sometimes it's easier to understand by looking back. So both Matthew 22, 35 and 40, and Mark 28 through 34 of chapter 12, both talk about these Pharisees talking to Jesus. Jesus is somewhere, and these Pharisees were always stalking Jesus. Some people were intrigued by him, but these guys, they were always looking to stumble Jesus. They're like, how could we trap him? How could we trick him? And so what they asked him, because they're well versed in the law, is, all right, Jesus, which law out of all the laws, which Moses did over 600 laws, beyond the 10 Commandments, and then there was some that these guys made up for themselves. Anyways, I digress. So they asked him, Jesus, which law is the most important? If you had to pick one, which one would you say it is? And he said, to love your God with all your heart and soul and might. And if I could add that, love your neighbor as yourself. All the laws that are in existence hang on these principles. And so basically what he's saying is, any law you can think of, it comes down to one of these two ideas. And when you look at the 10 Commandments, even just them, the first laws are directed at God, how our relationship would be with him. Don't have any gods before him because he's jealous. There are all these things that he does. But then starting after that, the first law after the first four is to honor your mother and father. It goes on to how we live in community with one another. Don't lust after your neighbor's wife. Don't steal from each other. Don't lie. Bear false witness against one another. All of these things. They're just more specifically spelled out in the other 600 plus laws. But basically, it comes down to those two principles. And it was like Jesus was kind of giving us a way to say, look, all of these rules, I have a hard time memorizing stuff. I could not, well, Maybe I could memorize 600 laws if I had a lifetime to do it. But, guy, how tough is that? And how binding is that? And so what the big picture is that God was wanting to show us that he loved us and wanted to be in relationship. And there is a beauty in the laws in some ways. Like, one of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 119. That was written by David, they believe. And one of the laws to become a king was that you would write down all of the rules on a scroll. You'd copy them down yourself, and you'd read them constantly, daily. And that's kind of what David is doing in Psalm 119. It's an acrostic poem, which means it's a poem like, you ever see a poem where you spell like your loved one's name out, my precious baby, and then like every letter that it starts with going downward would be what it starts with, kind of thing. Well, that's kind of what David is doing in 119, which, by the way, Psalm 119, longest psalm ever. Like literally the longest psalm. But it's beautiful. I don't always sit and read it in one go because it is quite a stretch. But every time I pick it up, there's just such a beauty in the character that it reveals of God. Shows that he's just and that he's kind and that he loves us. And it's just, his laws are a way for us to know who he is. And because God is such a loving and kind God, he actually gives us boundaries. Like, it would be pretty crummy to go in somewhere. A lot of these other people worshiped gods and would give like a sacrifice, some even sacrificing their own children, which is so sad and barbaric. And they wouldn't even know if their prayer would be answered or accepted or received. And even in these laws, God gave boundaries of like, this is what's right and this is what's wrong. So people could know definitely, yeah, this is a no-no, and yeah, this is okay. So I love that even though the laws are tough and there's a lot of brutality in some of these things, we see where there are people wiped out. It's done to keep from contaminating the rest of the population. The other thing that really sticks out to me in reading all of these books, what made the Israelites different from every other society was that they bore the characteristic of God. God actually dwelt down in the population with them, with a corrupt people, which has got to be pretty hard on God. But because he loved them, he did this. And his image is on us when we follow and obey his commands. Those things are the things that keep us clean and separate from other people. When they came out of Egypt, he was like, don't be like the Egyptians. They do things that are contrary to my character. And same with the people you're going to go and occupy the land in Canaan. These people also do things and that are contrary to my character. And through these laws, and through like when you read Psalm 119, you can see the beauty of these laws and how it builds relationship and shows us his character. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. I think I'll probably start covering Moses. He's quite a big hitter in the Old Testament, and I so can relate to him. A guy who was like big time patient, but still, you can see his humanity and his anger. We'll cover some of that. Anyways, if you have a request for a story or maybe a question about the Bible, you can type me a note and I'd be happy to do my best to answer it. All right, you guys have a blessed day.